Nice. Welcome to Breaking Ice, the podcast. I'm Josh Ferguson, your host, and today I have the pleasure to sit down with Robbie Craig, an artist. I don't know actually a whole lot about you. I have heard about you and seen your work, but I don't know your background. I don't know your history or anything like that. So let's get into it.
Well, firstly, thanks so much for having me. It's always so nice to fly into Northern Wells and meet people in the community and put on workshops, because it tends to be that's what I do when I land. And so just finished up a workshop with the high school here, and it was great. 2 days. Got the pleasure of working with your wife again too.
Yeah,
Josh, which is great. And so she's uber talented also on the art side of things. So it's great to be here.
That's awesome. And how many times do you come up to Northern Wells? It seems like a relatively often.
Oh, geez. So this year I've been really fortunate because I not only got to come up in, I think it was March, where there's still a lot of snow and temperatures are cool and there's still a bit of darkness.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've been here this late. Or sorry, I guess, into the summer. Yeah, into the summer. Yeah. So twice this year, which is, usually it's once kind of every second year. So this year it's been twice, and it's different because like the first time I got to work with the health authority, then followed by the community, which was put on by the museum and the health authority, and then this time around like the board. And so, just a whole different cast of like people and characters. And so nothing too eventful happened at this workshop. The last one, it was pretty wild. I don't know if you heard any of this.
I didn't hear anything.
So yeah, it was good. It was the first, I think, big art heist I've ever had.
The art heist. Wow.
We had an art heist.
I'm just going to check the focus. 1 second.
Yeah,
art
cool.
heist.
But it's kind of wild because, you like fly into Norman Wells and you're meeting new characters and people, and you're trying to keep people happy and present what you do and hope people kind of engage with it and embrace it and are successful. And I always have a little shop too, where people are like, oh, I just painted this fox. Maybe I'll buy a print of your fox and I can compliment them side by side.
Compare them.
And say like, this is the workshop I did and here's the art piece that I bought from him. And so in this event, this fella came in, and I thought he was taking the painting workshop. He wasn't. And he loaded up 8 prints in his envelope and said, I'm going to send you an e-transfer. And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. That's fine. And of course the internet connectivity wasn't really working.
Sure. Yeah. So
he couldn't make the payment. And I said, well, just when you get home, just make the payment, and that's fine. And so he left, and instantly people in the workshop were like, Robbie, let him go home with the art. And I was like, I did. It's fine. I'm like, this happens. Yeah, this happens all the time. Like, I mean, like Yellowknife, it's easy to kind of connect to somebody who knows of that person.
Sure,
And they were like, but he's a drifter. I was like, oh no. So apparently this guy had started in like Whitehorse to Inuvik and then Norman Wells. And so, he took my art prints and headed down the ice road.
And then what? Did he sell them and cash out big?
Well, like promised this payment.
$70,000 of art.
Yeah. But didn't ever pay. So I was getting ready to leave, and it was suggested that maybe I go report it to the RCMP because he'd done some other things. And so I was like, well, okay, like I'll go explain that I've lost some art, and not that I was expecting to ever see anything out of this, but so I reported it, and they said, well, we'll get a bolo on the ice roads going on. And so I was like, okay. And Sunday night, like 4 days later, bing, an e-transfer comes through.
There you go.
And I was like, oh, he did pay. That's great. And then it was followed by the RCMP writing me on Monday morning saying, we just want to make sure that this person's payment has come through. We've caught up with them.
So they caught up with them and they're like, did you pay your e-transfer?
Well, and it was probably like, you've arrived to this next
I'm just
small...
imagining them throwing one of those like tire spikes across the winter road.
But the best is it's like, okay, you've arrived to this next northern community that you're probably going to cause people some issues, and you're not leaving here until we have...
To the next art workshop.
Next proof. I mean, a little bit of proof that you've paid this payment, and then we'll let you go kind of thing. So I was like, oh, he paid. Here's an image of the e-transfer. Like, I don't want to cause this guy any grief, right?
No.
But the best was, like, I have this story. Art heist, Norman Wells.
I feel like that puts you into a new class of artists, like how many artists have had an art heist?
Oh, I'm sure a bunch, but not down an ice road.
You're in a class of your own.
I know. So I was like, oh, this is fantastic content. But it all worked out, and I don't know. I'm sure he was probably going to use it for his next. For sure. Like, hey, I'm headed to this pub. Here's some prints. Let's dump these for a few bucks, and
So my parents are artists.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and they do ceramic sculpture. So it's like they do slip casting.
Cool.
So my dad will make molds, or he has a mold maker now. But then he's an incredible sculptor, and my mom's a painter, so she paints the sculptures, and then they kind of collaborate in that way. Yeah. And they sell their art for depends on the size of the sculpture, but like an average one might be like this big, and they'll sell it for like $1,500, $2,500 or whatever. That's amazing. But he found a bowl of his on eBay for like $120.
No.
Yeah. Well, so he bought it and then resold it.
Well, that's clever. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
It's great because it's like he's the only one who could resell it at full value, like truly.
That's good because I mean you do worry about coming across like these pieces that you've put in so much labor.
Yeah.
Through, and somebody's moving or somebody's passed away.
I think that's probably the most common.
And families are like taking things to Goodwills and stuff.
Sure.
And
so then your art just like ends up at a thrift store kind of thing.
Oh, could you like it? Yeah, it's that probably the same feeling that your parents.
Yeah, thought, I think my dad was psyched.
But you know what? It's a good turnaround though. Like that's clever thinking. Mm-hmm. Like, oh yeah, I'll buy it.
Yeah, he's like, I'll totally buy that.
Repurpose it, sell it.
They just made the base again and then sold it for full price.
Oh no, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool.
So how you had a question? Go on.
No, it was just.
How did you become an artist? Like, is it in your family? Is it like what's your background?
Yeah. So I guess the background to art in my family is. My mom went through art school, so she has an art history major, and she was a watercolor artist.
Okay,
but not like a commercial artist or a practicing artist. Like she kind of came out of art school,
like a hobbyist.
Well, yeah, like I think it was kind of a dream, and but it led into just different areas of art. So she became a teacher, and she taught, and. But then when she left teaching, she started a few businesses, and it was jewelry making and like floral arrangement stuff. So she definitely was still a bit of an entrepreneur with it, and kind of took that to a point before my parents got into small business and bought small business. And then that kind of door closed on her.
Okay.
But I think she's definitely like that person that 100% is, like a creative. Oh, you okay?
Yeah, just swallowed wrong.
But she's, in different mediums, and she's just that creative soul.
Yeah, she
right?
needs to be crafting.
And her mom was also, I guess you would call it like a folk artist. Okay. So my grandmother, Nanny, she did a lot of painting too, but it was folk painting. And it was always with a group of ladies, like bridge.
Okay,
They'd get together. And
it was a social thing.
Yeah. So, but once again, not like really in that commercial side of things.
Yeah.
Then the other side of the family, I had two grandfathers that were both painters, and so
this is you don't come out of nowhere.
No, but both, like, I think my great grandfather Craig, his name was Harry Craig. He was a landscape painter, and I think he was a kind of an adventure kind of dude.
Yeah,
like he lived in Alberta, was headed out to the mountains, kind of that plein air stuff he was doing.
Yeah.
But once again, it was his weekend. Like, I'm going to go to the mountains. I'm going to create an image. And I mean, some of his stuff, it's like late 1800s, early 1900s I guess 1900s, like 1947.
Yeah.
Like 30s through 40s, he was pretty prolific.
Good stuff.
But just for like family, like, hey, I painted this, and and they were watercolor painters. Like, here's the watercolor painting. And so I have a few things that he did from way back when. And then my grandfather, Craig, he also was a painter. I think he was watercolor as well, but he would take an image, like his favorite artist, like say a Monet or, Gauguin, and he would recreate them. Wow. So we have a lot of these like recreations. So once again, hobbyist, love the idea of creating.
But dedicated.
but yeah, not selling, just
sure.
And then all of a sudden this guy comes around.
Capitalism.
But no, like for me though, same thing, like just always loved creating, but it kind of was closed. Yeah, it was just that door kind of closed with sports and school.
I just had one of those moments where I was like, if it's not recording, I'm gonna be so annoyed.
Yeah.
We're good.
But just back in grade, like I always loved creating comic book heroes and monsters, and when my parents started their like small businesses and stuff like that, I was often at home and I'd get lost in creating like Dracula and monsters and stuff like that. And then when I went to high school, I found a lot of success in like grade 9, 10, 11, 12 art, but it was coupled with sports. And so I think for me, as any kid, like you're looking for an outlet that's positive, that you feel fulfilled. Yeah. And I'd get lost in art, but it was so, like, you're isolated when you're creating a bit too, right?
Yeah, I think so.
But sports is so social. And especially in a time of high school, I think we all kind of play that card of like, oh, I enjoy being social and being part of a team. And
well, it's part of finding out, like, I guess establishing your own identity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of like, who am I?
Yeah. And so I found that my family, like, whether if it was football, rugby, or racing and skiing, like when good moments would happen, there was a lot of celebration. And so it was almost like this need to belong, or like you're saying, finding yourself. I found kind of through sports, and that art window I wasn't even looking at as like, oh, maybe I'm okay at this too. Sure. And so I remember like my art teachers, there was this cabinet in high school, and if you got like a 95% on something, they'd feature it in the high school, like senior hallway. And so very early, as like grade 9, some of my art was being put in this display cabinet.
Oh, that's cool.
But I didn't realize it was cool then.
But you hadn't begun to develop a style or anything.
No, nothing. It was like kind of led by like our teacher, like, hey, we're going to do some embossing, like emboss some angels. And it's like, what?
Yeah, I painted my best painting in high school, and that was it. That was the peak of my painting career.
But yeah, so these things would often wind up in the display cabinet, but I never really appreciated that was cool at the time. It was just kind of cool to be like, oh, the Wildcats won the GBSSA whatever tournament.
Sports had more social weight to it than
I think art. So. Yeah, and part of that team and but now looking back,
what sports? Sorry.
So rugby was, I guess, my biggest game, and then racing and skiing and football.
And where'd you go to high school?
I went to Eastview Secondary School in Barrie, Ontario.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then but so it was, that was a big part of my life. But looking backwards, like I think I should have. Now I was like, oh gee, I was actually okay in art back then, and I wish I had have appreciated it a little bit more, maybe for those moments, because it was special. But I just didn't realize.
Well, it's hard to know.
Special. Yeah. So that's kind of, I guess, where I started, and then went to university, and then became a teacher, and then came north.
So teaching in art seemed like threads throughout your family.
Yeah.
Your mother was a teacher?
Mom was a teacher as well.
At the school that you went to?
No. She wasn't teaching then. She kind of, when I was born, she left teaching.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so became a teacher like Mom, and my wife, now girlfriend at the time, we finished up at London, Ontario Western, right? And we didn't know what to do with life.
Of course.
So it was like, well, let's travel. Let's go traveling. Right. So we wanted to go to Australia and New Zealand for like a year. And my grandparents, like my grandfather was like my father in my life. And so he was like, Robbie, if you go to New Zealand or Australia for a year, you take a year outside of, like, you've graduated like your first degree, I just worry that Australia is going to lead to the next place. And all of a sudden there's going to be this time lapse, and you're just going to become this traveler.
That happens to people.
Yeah. And so he said, why don't you and Nicole figure out what you want to do next? And if you want to go to Australia or New Zealand, go. But find another bit of education to add while you're there. And so we were like, well, what's that mean? So anyway.
Retrospectively, it kind of makes sense, though. He's like, don't completely abstain from your development.
Yeah, go enjoy the culture, travel, like leave, do abroad, but, add something else to your name. And so we found there was a really neat university in New Zealand, North Island, Hamilton, called University of Waikato, and they were doing like a teaching program that was kind of would allow for the first time Canadians into the program, because there was a big BC influence that BC was following New Zealand curriculum, kind of, or basing content that they were developing for curriculum around New Zealand concepts.
Okay.
So we got accepted and we went to New Zealand, and my grandparents were like, hey, you just go, we'll fund this thing. Oh, and so sick. I was like, even better. So we went, and without, I think, that encouragement, I don't know if I would have done that. So lived as a Kiwi for a year and became teachers, and could have probably stayed.
So you weren't a teacher before you went to New Zealand? You got certified in New Zealand?
Yeah. Okay. Became a teacher there, and through the University of Waikato. And, and then finishing up the program, like, we would have had jobs there, but I got homesick.
That's fair.
I was like, oh man, I miss Tim Hortons. I miss my family of
cream donuts.
I know. Our family was sending us blank cups of Tim Hortons cups while we were there.
Like with the rim rolled up.
Oh yeah. But it just sounds so, oh my God. But it sounded like, I don't know. It was this great year, but I was ready to come back to Canada and see family, and we got back to Canada, and teaching was pink slipped. So there's no positions, and we went through the accreditation process and
transferring your accreditation to Canadian.
Yeah, so that everything was steady to go, and we got all that, and there was just everywhere was pink slipped, and so we got interviews in the Rainbow District, which is like Sudbury area.
Yeah, okay.
And so they promised us kind of like 3 to 4 days of subbing, a week. And at that point, then the culture shock of being back in Barrie, like without having
purpose
or job. And so my old university job asked if I'd like to come back, which was in a factory. And then I'm around all these guys 5 years later with a bunch of education. And they're all kind of teasing me, like, hey, you're back where you started. Why'd you leave?
Fair enough. Yeah.
And then that started this kind of travel bug more. And the concept was like, well, let's do something crazy. Let's go north. And maybe I've heard, there's adventure, new culture, like just new beginnings, like things like, let's consider this. So we applied to all these different boards in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, and all of a sudden we got a bunch of responses, like, very quickly.
Yeah,
and
people want it, right?
Yeah, and we started interviewing, and
I realized my pager is going off.
Oh,
that's what's buzzing.
Yeah,
I thought it was the chairs.
Oh, yeah. So really quickly, we started interviewing with the Clecho Community Services, like the TCSA. Yeah. And there was a couple jobs in Wekwati, like it was known as Snare Lake at one point, but it's Wekwati. Mm-hmm. And so we applied on those, and we were successful. And they said, oh, and how would you feel about being a principal? And I was like, I'm 25. Sure. Can do anything. So we accepted those jobs, and we went to Wekwati.
So you became a principal right away?
Became a principal, which was no joke to this day.
Yeah.
The hardest thing that, for, I think, a 25-year-old that could have potentially come knocking,
That's some serious responsibility.
It's responsibility. There's staff, there's new community, flying community, culture shock of being away from New Zealand.
It's a whole different world, right?
Yeah.
Even from Barrie. Well, like, definitely
everything,
from Barrie. Yeah.
Everything. And, and I mean, everywhere, like, when you start teaching, the first thing you want to do is it's relationship building, right? So
you have to.
We knew right away, it was like, okay, we need to, like, meet people and start developing relationships with staff and kids. And of course, in a place like Wekwati, there's not usually teachers that will stay for 5, 10, 15 years. So it's more difficult because you're trying to say, hey, no, we're good people. Like, we want to get to know you. We want to be here and, learn and also, teach a bit and,
Well, actions speak louder than words, eh? So as a community member, if you're looking at the school and you see so much turnaround, you're like, oh, are they really dedicated? And even though you might have a core staff group who is, seeing that turnover and your kid comes home and it's like, my teacher left or whatever.
It's brutal. It's devastating for parents. And
So especially when the good ones leave.
Oh, and so trying to kind of break that ice.
Yeah.
But, kind of just get to know people and start that process was a bit challenging at first.
Yeah,
and,
I bet.
And then within kind of like, I would say 6-8 weeks, it was great. Like the community opened up and the culture started, and we were being invited on the land to go for wood, or, somebody had got caribou and they wanted to have us for a feast, and it was amazing. But in that time, like, I mean, even in Norman Wells or Yellowknife, like, we all need hobbies, and
Totally.
I didn't have one. And
No.
so, I was chopping wood, and I was going out with the boys, and we were doing all this stuff, and
it's a good time, but it's nice to have something else.
But I just needed something that was for me, and I didn't know what it was. And finally my wife just said, well, I mean, we were cooking bread and all this stuff. We were doing everything.
Sourdough.
Yeah. And so finally Nicole said, well, when you were a kid, you used to draw a lot. Like, why don't you draw? And I kind of looked at her. I was like, no. Well, she started.
Okay.
And she started drawing, and then she started painting, but she kept coming to me and was like, I don't know how to do Bob Marley's hair. Like, you helped me with shading on the dreads. And so, like, she was creating all these cool portraits and stuff. And so, but I started helping.
This begrudging talent.
But not like, once again, it was just this thing as a kid, right?
Yeah.
And so I started just playing around with her, and, she was creating all this cool stuff. And then she was like, I think you should do something. And I didn't. And she just kept doing this. And
why? Why didn't you?
I don't know. I was kind of watching her, like, be so successful in my mind, like what she was creating, and like she was being quite lit up by it. And it was actually my big brother, who's actually my uncle, but we were raised together.
Okay.
Because he's only a few years older than me.
Yeah.
And so when we left Wekwati, we went to Betchico. And so in Betchico, it was the same thing. Like, it was more people, the road to Yellowknife. Like, it was cool. Same board, Clecho Community, like TCSA. But I still felt like I needed something. And
so you didn't start painting in the previous community?
No. And so my big brother, Shane, comes to town, and we're taking him to all the places that you do in Yellowknife and Betchico and all this. And he fell in love with this painting. And he tried to get it, and they said, well, prints have been sold out of this, like, from Northern Images back when it was there, since, like, I think the 80s or something. And he's like, oh, I'd buy it in a heartbeat. But they had art cards of it. So I remember I bought an art card.
Yeah.
And I looked at Nicole, and I was like, he loves this so much, I think I could paint it. So, and she was like, paint it. And I said, well, I've been kind of monkeying around with you a little bit. And anyway, so he laughed, and he was getting married to his like girlfriend at the time, and I was a groomsman. I was like, wouldn't that be a great present if I kind of like, present.
What I feel like, I'm like, part of me is just like, what caused you to think that? Because
I don't know.
It's just I
was like, he can't get it, but he's the guy that you can't, like, he's done so well that, like.
No, but I'm kind of like, you were confident in your skill though. Regardless,
I don't know. I just looked at it, and I was like, he wants this so bad, and
I could do it.
And this would be kind of a great memento for him, like, if I painted something pretty similar like this. And
so how close was it?
Oh, it was pretty good. and Nicole,
can you show, like,
no, can't,
we can't do a picture?
No. I won't, like, because it was in the beginning, right, where I wasn't an artist, and like, when people start, they're often, it's like, oh, there's like a Picasso, I'm gonna more or less copy that. And
you can't develop your own style without trying other things. That's like high school. Like, you're trying out all these personalities. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, maybe I'm a sports jock. It's like, oh no, not quite.
Yeah. So anyways, so she looked at me, and she was like, so you're gonna buy the art card? I said, oh yeah, I'm gonna buy the art card, and I think I can do this. And so they left back to Ontario, and I bought all the stuff and painted this thing, and I was like, oh man, that's kind of frightening. It's pretty good. And Nicole was like, oh gee, that is good. And so we gave it to them as their wedding gift. And
is it hanging in their house?
Yeah, it's there.
That's awesome.
And so right away, like, their friends, like, at the wedding saw it, and they were like, how do we get a painting? And I was like, oh, I'm not a painter. But then I remember being like, well, maybe I should try to paint some of my own stuff. And so I took a couple of workshops with painters I loved. And then all of a sudden I started kind of just dabbling with my own stuff, and they kept selling, like, to staff members, right? Teachers kept buying them. That's how you start, right? And their friends started buying them, and then all of a sudden some people would reach out that I didn't even know, and then I had this list of paintings, like, to develop for people. And it's so funny because back in those days, it was like, I can do the painting, give me the money for the canvas, and $200.
Yeah.
And so, and they'd pay in cash. And so I was like, Nicole, I feel like we're like drug dealers. Like, people are coming to the house with the canvas, they're giving me the cash, and then I'm painting this painting.
That's a hilarious workflow, eh? You bring me the canvas. I don't care what size.
Just all painting for 200, I think $300. And I remember I painted this polar bear at one point, and somebody said, I'll give you $1,000 for that. And I was like, $1,000? Like, I couldn't even process it. Like, it was just...
Yeah, well, it's funny because art is such a subjective thing.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously. And then, but the other thing is that so many people don't value themselves. This is like an epidemic in the professional world anyways.
Yeah.
But in the art scene, a lot, and it's like, well... What's that whole thing about? Well, it's just some paint. Like, how much is it worth or whatever? Like,
and I just felt so confident in not understanding anything, but just going for something. If that makes sense. Like, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even know how to mix paint back then.
Well, yeah, but like, it was like the great artists of history just figured it out. You know what I mean? Like, they just started doing things and had a drive and had a vision and had a passion for it,
so it was quite organic, I guess. Like, it was just word of mouth, and I had
the North is good for that.
And I just had all of this work, and then within a couple years, 2-3 years, I found that we were driving into Yellowknife way too much to deliver paintings, and I remember thinking back then, I was like, wow, like, I got X amount for this painting. I just have to create like X amount of paintings and we could like buy a house. Like, I remember like thinking that way.
It's $1,000 a painting. If I make 800 paintings.
Yeah, I can buy this. But back then, like, like, we're going back 15, 16 years ago.
Sure.
And housing in Yellowknife wasn't that, right?
Yeah, true.
But it was just great side hustle kind of thing. And then I remember becoming good friends with a well-known photographer in town. And he started capturing images of the painting so I could make prints, and he'd make the prints for me. Because I found I couldn't keep up with this demand.
How could you?
But I felt maybe I can sell some prints. And so the prints started selling. And I was like, oh, this is nice. This is relieving me. Because I was teaching full-time.
Yeah, you had a full-time job and a full-time side hustle.
Yeah, and I was painting late at night.
And family at this point or not yet?
No, but I was just really, really excited. And then kind of 2-3 years later, we moved into Yellowknife, and this photographer that was creating all this stuff, he finally said to me, he's like, Robbie, I've got a busy, workload too, and, I don't have staff, and your print kind of creation it's like, I'm not able to keep up with what you need. I would suggest, and he gave me some names. And so I started kind of going that way. And then he said, and by the way, I think it's time that you enter the Northwest Telephone Book competition. And that was in 2011.
Okay.
And so I was like, I didn't even know what that was.
No.
And I was like, what's that? And he goes, you don't know what that is? And he goes, an artist is selected each year, and they get their art in the front of the phone book, and it goes across the whole Northwest Territory. So, and I mean, in 2011, a phone book was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
And so, and I guess it still is. You need them for emergency purposes, and
well, it's a thing that's around. Like, there's visibility on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, "It's time. Apply for that." And so I was like, "Dave, like,
it's like a Jedi thing.
Yeah,
it's time.
I'm not ready for that." And he goes, "No, you are. Like, what do you have?" And I said, "I've got one painting on hand." He goes, put that one in. And he goes, the painting that we have from you, he goes, let's enter that as well. I said, but it's your painting. And he said, that's okay. If it wins, so be it. And so I had gone through the...
So wait, you would have to send them the painting?
Yeah. So the way it works is I read through the rules, and it kind of freaked me out because I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to put like all my emotions and everything on my sleeve. Like, what if I'm not selected, which I wasn't expecting to be selected, but
what's vulnerable?
Like, who am I up against? Like, why am I saying I'm already an artist? And I just felt really.
But how long have you been doing it at this point?
I guess it was like 2-3 years at this point.
All right.
So
the lack of confidence still makes sense.
Yeah. So, and things were still really raw. Like my understanding of color mixing was basically like, how do I make it lighter? Well, add white. How do I make it darker? Add black. Sure. And that was as complicated as I got.
That's a basic understanding, right? That gets you where you need to go, kind of.
Yeah. And so anyway, so I was like, okay, Dave, but you do realize if it wins, that piece has to be surrendered to them. And he goes, but you can always paint me something else. And so I was like, okay, whatever. So we put in the images and it won. And for the one that he had. And I was like,
of course.
And I was like, this is a great deal for me, but it kind of sucks that you've lost your painting. So I won. And then that's where everything went downhill for me. Oh. And it was.
That's not what I expected to hear.
No, like it was so like epic that like this thing that was so fun, that was a hobby, that there was so much like excitement built around, but pressure now because I'm doing prints and my commission list was kind of long. But then all of a sudden I won this competition, and then immediately the I guess the corporate side of art, galleries from down south, people had my name, email, social media. That became a reality that I wasn't ready for. Like, okay. Like I was like, whoa.
It became professional. But you were still teaching at this point?
I was still teaching.
Okay. And you didn't have time.
Yeah, it just became this like, oh my God. Like there's all this representation talk and print signing and visits and da-da-da-da-da. And I still don't view myself as an artist. And this is real fast. So I found out end of March, I think I won. And I remember being like, I don't know if I want my name like this at this point. Like I don't have a portfolio. I don't have a body of work. I didn't go to art school. And these are all these hard questions that I'm being asked about. And like, what's my process? I don't know. I mix black and white in my paint.
Yeah. Blue plus white is lighter blue.
And so like I remember feeling like the weight of the world on my shoulders. Plus my board of education didn't really know that I was doing this. And as a GNWT worker, like you have to ask for permissions on these side businesses. Yeah. And so I became very stressed. And I remember going down to Ontario for summer, and my family has a family cottage. And I basically ran up to the cottage and I'm like, Mom, they all think I'm this like professional artist. Like, what am I going to do? And I hadn't really like explained.
Had you thought of doing it full time by then?
Not at all. Like it was, my mom knew I was dabbling in art, and so did my family a bit. And I'd created some pieces for the family. And
I love this story, by the way. This is great.
And then all of a sudden this thing is real. And my mom was like, well, how do you feel about it? And I said, well, I get a lot of joy out of it. Like it's a passion, I guess. But I feel like it's like imposter syndrome. Like I feel like I'm fooling people.
Yeah.
And so she was like, well, let's look at your body of work so far. And so I pulled out the probably like 40 paintings, 50 paintings.
That's a lot of paintings though.
And so she's going through things, and she just said, Robbie, you know what? Like I went to art school, and there's a voice in your work. And sometimes it takes somebody like 20, 30, 40 years to develop like a style. Yeah. And she was like, there's something present already in what you're doing. You're heavily using line. There's certain color palettes that you're using. And she's like, we just have to get this more refined and like add more depth and layers. And she's like, you've got something going here. Like there's a voice. And so,
yeah, for sure.
And I was like, oh, that's good to hear. And so I remember that summer, she was like, we got to teach you how to mix color. And so all summer, like it was color theory, like with Mom.
That's sick.
And it became something. Like I knocked out like a couple paintings with her.
Pull that towards you.
Oh yeah,
you can pull it back with
No, it's good.
Whoa,
it's flying. But I knocked out a couple paintings with her, and you know, the next summer it was more complicated with different colors and theories and blah blah blah. And I just remember I was like, Mom, you know what? Like we got to do this every summer. Every summer, if it's just even one painting, we sit down, we talk about color, you mix the colors, and I'll paint with the colors. And then that'll be... And so last summer, there's this image called Winter Tranquility, which is like an A-frame cabin with mountains and a big moon. And so she mixed all those colors. So every year there's like a painting that we do. She'll mix my colors.
And do you advertise it that way? Like, do you put it out there in that sense?
Well, to people I know, or now your podcast, but but like I'll tell like certain people, like it's just something special, right? Totally. So anyway, so that happened, and then I went back to the north that summer feeling a little bit more confident in what I do, and maybe
you can mix colors now.
Yeah, and then this concept of like maybe I will work with some of these, gift shops and trade shows and local places in town with the bodies of work and prints and things I can do. And that was the beginning. And then within kind of 3-4 years from there, I got this bug where I was like, I think I want to be like, it would be my dream to be a full-time artist.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? How does that work? And that was for the next few years, like what I was trying to do. And then I guess 5 years ago that reality came to be for me.
Okay.
And so it was pretty neat. Yeah.
Wow. It requires a lot of courage to actually commit to the thing that you're good at.
Well, I think the biggest thing for me is just that, like, I am a teacher by training, right?
Sure.
So not an art teacher, but I taught for 12 years and then took a leave. And so, I went part-time teaching. And so I was able to teach part-time for 2 years. And that kind of allowed me to test those waters a bit. Mm-hmm. And then from there it was, okay, I need to make the hard decision. Like, what am I doing? I'm going to take a leave. And so I did. But the leave was nice because the leave was like, okay, if you don't like this after a year,
there's permission.
There's my teaching position I can go back to. So, like super fortunate that I had the Cliccio that were behind me and approved my leave. And so then, I took a year's leave, which I was allowed up to 3, did the 3 years leave, and then decided to ultimately just leave, which was tough at the same time.
Well, you had invested a lot of time in it. That makes sense.
Yeah. And, but like it's one of those things where I'm working with kids and coaching and all that, cause I was a phys ed teacher. Right. Okay. So that's definitely missed. But I think if I didn't take that leap, it would be, 15 years later, okay, I'm retired. I'm ready to be a full-time artist. Well, the opportunities might not have been the same, or
you don't have the runway,
the time. Yeah. Or just the momentum of it all. And so after, so many hours of going back and forth with family, my wife, my mom, like, my grandfather at the time, it was like, for professions, being a teacher it's a nice one, because it's not like, you've worked your whole career to become like a president or a CEO of a company. And if you take that leap for a passion, well, you might take the chances of starting at the bottom again. Mm-hmm. Whereas a teacher, if there's pressure, well, next week, hopefully, knock on wood, there's some principals in town that might say, oh yeah, come sub with us.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, you've got like a lot of different skill sets and like things that you've done to, be a good sub teacher, and then work yourself back into the system of teaching. Mm-hmm. So I left a pretty awesome career to focus on something that's pretty exciting and awesome too. Yeah. So yeah, I've been really fortunate, I guess is the best way to put it.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's funny. My parents went to art school in Toronto, and I think like, I'm going to botch this right now, but something like there's 3 practicing artists out of a class of 30 or 40 or something like that. And I think that's so much the case. And I think it's like a work-life balance thing, like figuring out how to stay inspired and then also like not feel like, I don't know why people feel so much like if they sell their art, then it's not like their art, or they're compromising their vision or something like that. And
well, it's tricky. Like I remember, I've had these chats with like gallery owners, which, a gallery owner is like a commercial owner, like where they're selling art.
They have a business to run.
Yeah. And then there's museum curators. And so there's like very different like pedagogies and theories on like what the artist is.
Sure.
And so I mean, like, am I an artist? Am I a commercial artist? Am I, like,
all of the above, right? Like,
so, but it gets complicated, right? Mm-hmm. Because it depends on how you're going to deliver on what you do. And so that's the bit for me. Like, I viewed us as having our hands in like many baskets, I guess. And so, if I can come and lead a workshop mm-hmm. and meet new people and paint with people and show them my passion, what I do, and give them a kind of a glimpse of how I go about my process, like, that's a win for me.
Well, the beautiful thing about that is that you're blending your practices.
Yeah. And then, if I'm on social media and I've got like a great page, like with a cool post, and people are engaging with it that way, that's another basket that you have to be aware of. And then there's the side where, we also have a business in town where we've got 4 walls and tourists can come in and potentially view the art.
Is it all your art kind of thing?
Yeah. And then so that's another, like, you're a business, like, you're not just an artist, you're a business owner, you're an entrepreneur.
Sure.
And then there's the side where you work with galleries and they might carry originals or have you in for a private show, or, you're releasing a book and you're doing a children's book reading. And then lastly, of course, if you're really fortunate, you might get a piece in a museum that's permanent. And so, like, I've been able to fortunately kind of be a part of all those things. Mm-hmm. So it's complicated where, I think for me to be a full-time artist, I need to have my hands in all those baskets. Like, it would be very tough if I was at home, let's say in your beautiful, like, business, and I'm looking out to the mountains and water in this log home, and all I do is paint originals. That would be tough, because you have to find the buyers for those originals. And so I think what you're saying is the artist that, goes to art school, if they really plan on taking on this career, it's not, you're just an artist. You've got to be like the teacher. Yeah. You've got to have your hands, like, you're the social worker, you're the friend, you're the parent, you're the caregiver, you're the, the coach, you're the math teacher, the English teacher. You've got to be a bit of everything. Mm-hmm. So,
and that helps you kind of explore different parts of yourself, and then also not get burnt out.
And you know what? Some days, like, I feel like I'm the artist. Some days I feel like I'm the entrepreneur.
When do you feel the most artisty?
Oh, geez. It's January through March.
Is that when you're painting originals?
Yeah, generally that's when, like, I'm not trying to hold shows or travel. Like, it's dark in the north and there's fire and warmth and things are quiet. It's cold.
Oh, interesting. So then you kind of blossom in, for lack of a better way to put it, in the rest of the year.
Yeah.
Do your social events and things like that.
Yeah. Like, I find there's just
networking.
Like where I am in Yellowknife, it's just so tourist heavy.
Obviously.
September through December. Well, September through March for Aurora. Mm-hmm. And then September through December for people thinking about, like, gifts for holiday seasons. Mm-hmm. And then there's my, like, kind of art, like, private show schedule as well. And it's really heavy kind of July through December. So I feel I'm always somewhere managing an art shop or driving kids to sports or traveling to an art show during those months. And then January, it's cold. It's, the hype of Christmas or the excitement is.
You're looking towards spring and it's a while away.
I got to buckle down and create something kind of cool. So
that's sweet. Yeah. So where do you, like, what's your space like? Where do you paint?
I'm weird. So
just in your car.
Well, like you're in these underwater years of young kids that you're trying to, like, soak up, like, these moments of all the interesting antics and stuff that they get into. So I didn't ever want to put myself in, like, a garage or, like, a bedroom alone. Yeah. So I would always take the kitchen, our family kitchen, and paint. And I'm weird because I don't paint on an easel. I paint flat surface.
Yeah, Leanna was telling me about this.
Yeah.
Go on.
And even when I would lead the workshops, that's how I make people paint too.
So if they're painting in your style, they have to do it that way, right? Yeah. Doesn't work.
So we do that. And so I always put myself in the kitchen, at the kitchen table, and there's paint on our kitchen table forever. My kids eat their meals.
They like move your bowls, like, out of the way and stuff?
No. Like, I move my paintings and stuff. Yeah. But, like, when we're eating, kind of like I don't know, these notches on your table are like paint spills. Like
okay. Like the counter or whatnot.
Yeah. So this table, it's like a nice wooden table like this, but for a family of 6, it's covered in paint.
It's awesome.
And so I like to put myself in the middle of chaos with children and family and cooking and socializing, and for those interruptions. Like some people can't work like that.
That's so interesting because I would imagine that, well, I don't exactly know your whole process, but I would imagine to create the kinds of things that you create, you do need to get into that flow state.
Yeah, and there is some of those times too.
Yeah.
Like, used to wake up, it was always weird, like painting would wake me up. It's strange. But I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and I'd go downstairs, and we used to have
paint in the kitchen.
Yeah, paint in the kitchen. We used to have kind of rules about my painting. It would be, what was it, when our kids were really little, it would be, if I woke up at a time like that, I could paint till like 9 a.m., 10 a.m. And then I'd have to put it away just to have those like real moments with children, not just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, and if you do that too much, it feels horrible.
Yeah. And so then, so 10 a.m. was kind of my limit on weekends. That made sense for us. And, but once because I was working full time at that point too, like I was trying to balance these kids, drive to Batchico. How
old are your kids now?
12 and 8.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Olivia's 9 on May 2 next weekend. Like, whew, that's crazy. But, and I mean, now it's changed because I'm not working out in Batchico. So there's not a 12-hour or 10-hour a week commute, and, I'm not there all day. So my painting time is now through the week at home, and which is funny because those happy interruptions with family around when I was teaching full time and still trying to put in time to paint when the kids were around. I'm at home alone now.
Yeah.
And that's weird too, because, teaching is such a social job.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. I like to see staff and friends and socialize, and all day. Once I drop my kids off at 8:30 in the morning, I'm at home alone.
And you're like, man, I should really be productive, but like, I find that too in my work is that up here, there's not like, I'm kind of working in a silo. Yeah. Like there's not a whole lot. Like if you live in Toronto or something, there's videographers all over the place. Yeah. And creatives and I was talking to my friend and he's like, you have such a weird situation.
It is, right? Yeah. And I mean, find somebody else in your town where you live that's in a similar situation. It's tough.
Yeah,
totally. There's not a lot of people. So, and same thing with me. Like I have 2 dogs because of this. So
I don't want a pet. I just need the happy interruptions.
Yeah. So I've got 2 dogs, and I mean, like the one guy named after
my. Think about having more kids. Just keep them coming.
Oh, easy. I don't know. There's probably going to be an announcement about that soon too. But but the dogs are great to have around, and they are those happy interruptions. Right? Yeah. Where if I'm frustrated, let's go for a walk. Or
do you ever paint in the studio, like in the shop? You ever thought about doing that? Like publicly?
Yeah, there was a bit of that kind of concept, but I think I feel I'm pretty social, but I'm not. Like when my family's around, I have no problems painting around them. But I think when people come in through the door, Yellowknife, it's touristy, so I have to. Like really, for every person that walks through that door, there might be say 1 in 10 people that are aware of the art. Like, oh, geez, I know your work. Like my mom gave me a Christmas ornament of yours, and I'm from, I don't know, let's just say Newfoundland.
Sure.
And so that's an easy conversation for me. It's like, you're having friends over to dinner. There's a seat for your friend at the table. Like they get it. And when somebody like that walks through the door, it's like they have a seat at the table. Like I don't really have to.
Well, you have common ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But where, somebody from California is walking in and they're like, oh, this is really cool. Like, what is it? And I'm like, oh, hey, I'm Robbie. I'm a Yellowknife artist. This is all my work. That you've got this time limit of trying to kind of, tell them your story, what you're doing, why you're doing it. And then hopefully they can make a connection through what they've just experienced last night with Aurora or fishing, and they see an image of like, hey, that's striking. I need to bring that back with me to California because this reminds me of my trip. If I can do that in seriously like a 5 to 8 minute,
that's a tall
time
order.
slot. Yeah. So if I'm working on a painting, I feel the painting might lead into the conversation, and some of their looking around the shop might change. Much less, it's me having to clean a brush to put it down, because I don't know if they're going to stay for 5 minutes, 8 minutes, 30 minutes, and then that brush is wrecked. Or the paint, if I have to drop it, then potentially I've got a line that hasn't been filled, which will lead to a blemish. So we've just decided, like, you know what? It's probably not the best place for me to do work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Interruptions.
I was just like, oh, like that would be a place where you would be interrupted, which is a hilarious, thing to want to manufacture.
Yeah. So, but I think like something that would be good is, to your point, I should have a piece that sits on a table that is being worked on, that I'm not working on, but it's in the process.
Sure. And
then that could lead into a pretty neat conversation.
Well, you could have a piece that collects blemishes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that art den, like, I mean, the tourists that you're seeing that are just happy encounters with, what did Fight Club say, Edward Norton, single serving friends on the plane. Like, I love that expression because like you're trying to like connect with somebody and make a friend
totally,
like quickly. And immediately people start telling you stories. So that art den, I collect the most wild stories that walk through that door. And every weekend it's just like, you know what? We need a journal for this stuff, because I'm going to forget it. And like, you can't make this stuff up.
No, it's impossible to make up the multiplicity of human experiences. Like it's wild. It's mental.
And, sometimes I'll come home and, you tell these stories and my wife is like, oh my gosh, like seriously, somebody told you that, they believe that, or they, like, sure. Wow. That's amazing. So
that's so cool. Well, I wanted to talk to you today because one of the things that I like to, or I'm aiming to highlight here is help illuminate different paths that people could walk on, right? And the artist path is enigma. It's a difficult one, because it's not like you just go to art school and it's done. No. You know what I mean? Like, you could go to school, become an accountant, and like you could pretty for sure become an accountant. Yeah. But to become a successful artist is difficult. It's really difficult. So like, do you have like, I know it seemed like it happened pretty organically for you, but like, what would be your advice for someone looking into, or a young person going, I really want to do this, but I'm scared, and how do I proceed?
Yeah, that's such a loaded question.
For sure.
Like, it's so complicated, because I think the biggest thing is we all have passions. And so whether if it's fishing or hunting or, I don't know, skidooing, art, like working out, training, like, I don't know, like
whatever
sports,
it may be.
Whatever that passion is, that has to be the given. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think anybody should say, I'm going to become an artist because that's what I want to be. Like, it has to be that feeling of, I feel I'm connecting to people, they're creating a story, I'm feeling really good about what I do, they like what I'm doing. Like, and you might not know that at first because you haven't connected with people, but I think like that word talent always tricks me up a little bit. But it's like a principal in a school. Like, a principal, I don't think is anything that anybody should set out to be. And I can only say that, I guess, because I was a principal. But it's a calling, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, like, there's something that you're doing that you should be in this role for the greater good of a school or a community or whatever. And I think like art or sport or whatever, it's the same thing. Like, you've got this little weird buzz in your head that's saying, I need to do this. And I don't know what the purpose is, but it makes me feel good. And if it makes you feel good and you start getting that travel bug or art bug or whatever you want to call it, and it starts fulfilling and taking over your life, then I think like, I don't know, definitely go with it. But then you got to try it. You got to trial it. Because if you're painting, I don't know, something that like you feel really good about, but then you look at it and you're like, oh, Jesus. I'm not saying like sum yourself up on like somebody's views, but if people don't connect with it somehow, that could be a little tricky. And so often like in art shows, like people, they want to show me their work too, right?
Totally.
And a lot of the time I look at people's work and like wholeheartedly, like I'll say, oh my God, like you're way better than I could ever be. but like it's that confidence bit. It's that getting myself out there. So,
well, and it's also having the courage to share it.
Yeah.
And that's, well, just while I was listening to your answer, I was trying to think about what I would suggest to someone young trying to do something like that. And I think my advice would be to not underestimate the power of connecting with people.
Yeah.
You know,
and that's where I start with people. I'll say, okay, like you've shown me your work, like, oh, like, yeah, get that out there. How does it make you feel? I always ask people that, like, are you lit up by this, or is it just something that is, I don't know, like, not that you want to really showcase, but that makes you feel good. But if you want to make others feel good about it, have you done like a craft sale?
Yeah.
Like, and you know, at first, like, I remember one of the first things I ever did was some of the Yellowknife, like Christmas markets. And then it led into like Long John Jamboree. And then it led into, I was being invited to, you know, like artist walks in parks and different places. And so I was like, well, I'll try those. And, you know, sometimes like rock and art in the park, and there'd be bands that would be playing, and there'd be an art walk. And I remember that they were successful. And so that was my early understanding of like, okay, I think I'm doing something that I love. It makes me feel good sharing it. And then the craziest thing is when people tell me, when they look at a piece, what it means to them. Not like, oh, I like that you painted that canoe. It's like, oh my gosh, we had this yellow canoe that looks similar, and there's an island by our cottage, and you've hit that. And so that's like the total win. And so
I see that a lot with your work. Like, you know, I've seen, well, what did I saw? Mostly saw your foxes.
Yeah, the fox.
We have like a line in our kid's
yeah.
bedroom now. We're collecting them slowly. And but looking at your prints the other day, they recall memories.
Oh, that's cool.
Very and I spent a lot of time on canoe trips. I spent like 500 days canoe tripping or something stupid like that.
Yeah. That's epic. Yeah.
And
I'm still working on my J-stroke.
That's okay. Yeah. Go on like a 20-day trip and you'll sort it out, you know?
Yeah.
And even the print you brought by tonight, like that reminds me of a cottage on Temagami.
Cool.
Where I spent years and years, 18 summers. So
I always just say, like, try like local craft sales and see what like how it goes. And then of course, in the world that we're in right now, social media,
of course,
like jump on all those platforms, showcase as much as you can and see what the response is to that too. And then from there, if those things start going well, develop like easy products to make, like art cards, art prints, like magnets, those things a lot of people are interested in. And then obviously visit your local shops in town. Like every shop has usually a framer. And
my dad would also say is don't undervalue your work.
No, and putting a value on an artist's work to start is tough, because it's this war within, right? Like what am I? And so, but that's where I would always say, like, get involved with your community. And if the community starts like enjoying, or I guess responding to what you're doing, you know, you're on the right track outside of your own passion and kind of motivation, right?
So do you have anything on the horizon, or like what I want to ask is like, what makes you nervous about art? Like, do you have something coming up that you're like, I don't know if I can pull that off, or like,
oh, everything makes me nervous. I'm not kidding.
You're still nervous.
I'm still nervous. And like, even coming to Norman Wells and working with a body of teachers, which I'm a teacher, makes me nervous, because you want them to feel like successful, happy at the end of it. And then hopefully, you know, you're asked to return one day. And that's what I'm always nervous about. And like every show I do, I'm nervous about, because you want to be that artist or person that people think that they've connected to or are attending your show for that reason. And so I think a bit of nerve is good. If I would agree. If you're not feeling a little bit anxious about even your newest creation, then, you know, you're not totally inspired.
Well, yeah, I always think, like, if you're not nervous about it, you're not pushing yourself in the right way.
Yeah.
You know?
So, yeah, I'm always nervous. I'm always nervous. But I'm
practiced at being nervous.
Yeah. I mean, But I think it's good to be nervous, because I think that's also the drive in this whole thing too, to constantly improve.
Sure.
And grow and try new colors and compositions and themes, and and embrace Canada. And because, I try to paint different things that are significant to us all from traveling. And so,
Do you have paintings from outside the country?
No, I haven't really ventured that way. I'm pretty...
Well, no, your style's reminiscent of the North, for sure.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
So the dream is kind of like, my grandfather used to always say, so many people head down to, warm spots as their, family holidays and whatever. And he challenged us all basically with, it is a really neat thing if you're Canadian and you can say you've been to all 3 territories and 10 provinces. And if you can do that, that's a pretty incredible thing, as you get older.
Dude, I have not.
Yeah, so I'm missing one.
Oh wow, that's so much better than
one.
me. I've been to Ontario, Quebec, Manitoba, and the Northwest Territories.
Well, there you go. You've got, especially with Breaking Ice, you've got more purpose to hit some of these places, right?
Totally, yeah,
and
absolutely.
So I'm missing Newfoundland, and not that I didn't have opportunity to be there, but my wife, that's her last place too. And so we'll do it together.
You gotta go together. It's great.
So I think it's happening this summer.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah. So really excited about that. And then I can say I've done them all, which is really not done them all, but I've experienced a bit of,
for sure. Well, it's funny because I don't feel well traveled in Canada for that, but I have spent so long in a canoe and gone on all these rivers, right? So there is this whole other backcountry side of Canada that I have experienced, particularly around Ontario. But well, where can people find you?
Pretty much everywhere. No, just kidding. So I guess first and foremost, I live in Yellowknife, Northwest Territories. Often people visit, and I've been very fortunate that the community refers, cousins, aunts, uncles, mom, dads, grandparents to us, which is really neat, which is interesting. I'll tell you a side note story in a sec. We have an art den in Yellowknife. It's, on the corner of Weaver and Franklin, where the famous restaurant Bullock's is, and Weaver and DeVore, the famous hardware shop. So we have this little art den, and it's great. It's been there forever. And so tourists from all over pop in, which is really neat during, every month of the year, of the year, which is awesome. And then of course we're on social media, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the new one, Threads.
Oh yeah.
All that fun stuff, and it's just Robbie Craig's Northern Projects.
Nice.
And then we're in shops across the country and in Yellowknife, which is great. But it's funny because before we had the art den, my garage used to be this shop. And there's so many Airbnbs in Yellowknife, and often people have a frame print of, well, not often, there's a bunch of places in town that have frame prints of mine.
Okay, you can say often.
and people will say, where did you get that? And people would say, oh, well, Robbie Craig, he lives on, England Crescent.
Yeah. Oh, you know the guy?
Yeah, just knock on his door. He's got a shop in his garage.
Oh, God.
And we would have people, this went on for 9 years. People would show up all hours of the day.
Happy interruptions.
Yeah, and knock on the door, is this the artist? Oh, yeah. I heard you have a garage. Oh, yeah, open the garage up. And people would do their shopping in the garage. And it just got to the point where, the kids would be playing, and some big dude would show up and be like, is your dad here? and it was
just to add to the drug dealer kind of
yeah. And so we'd open up, but with bedtimes, as and bath times and dinner time, people want to socialize, they want to chat. And some of these these friends would, tourists would show up, and they want to tell you about their family that lives in Yellowknife and connections that we have and what they've done in town. And it was never a 2-minute, 5-minute discussion.
45-minute.
And it was always happy. It was awesome. But sometimes there'd be 2 hours. Yeah. And that's when, my daughters would be like, Dad, it's dinner time.
Can we press play on the movie?
Yeah, exactly. And so finally, when this opportunity to have the art den came available, it was just what a great opportunity to hopefully have. And so yeah, we jumped at it. And so
that's fantastic.
It's been awesome. Awesome.
Great. Well, thanks for your time and thanks for coming on.
And thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it, and your work is beautiful. I'll throw your links up on the podcast and whatnot, and maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Wicked.